Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for another virtual event. Today, we have a packed house, so we are going to do a quick introduction. Today, we have 15 key state panelists to go over how to expand on your brand, growth opportunities, and different ways to understand the markets in their area. And so today, I'd like to introduce some of our panelists. We have Amanda Ryman, and she is the Chief Knowledge Officer from New Frontier Data. We have Rachel Wright, with a CPA at AB Finwright. Is that correct?
Yep, correct.
Robert Hoban, I believe he will be joining us shortly. He is an attorney with Clark Hill. And we have Mike Gorell with our Menonino, Michael Schwam with Dwayne Morris LLP, Lawrence, is it Kajigal? Kajigal, a lot easier than I'm probably doing. And he is with the Kajigal Group. And then Tom Zuber and Raza Lawrence with Zuber Lawler. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining us today.
So thank you so much for joining today. As was mentioned, I'm Dr. Amanda Ryman. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer for New Frontier Data. And I was asked to kind of kick things off today by giving an overview of what we're seeing in the cannabis space and really where we're headed. I know that a lot of discussion today is going to be around where are new opportunities. And I'm kind of here to tell you that we need to create those new opportunities for ourselves. Because really the only way to see success is to actually grow the market. And we had a little discussion before about who's going to be the last state to come to the party. I think Wyoming was mentioned. I think Georgia was mentioned. But I grew up in Indiana, and I think we're going to win or lose, whichever way you want to put it. All right, so let's take a look at some of the successes and struggles that we're seeing in the cannabis space today. So on the successes side, we have adult use in 23 states. Welcome to the party, Maryland and Minnesota. We have a legal market that's worth $33.5 billion with 54 million cannabis consumers in the United States. We have a federal government that's actually going to be considering the rescheduling of cannabis out of Schedule I between the DEA and HHS. And of course, the whole point of legalization, we have seen a steep decline in arrests for cannabis and the generation of tax revenue that's being used for research. It's being used for community services, schools, and other community programs. But at the same time, we're experiencing a lot of struggles. So we may have a legal market worth $33.5 billion, but we have an illicit market worth $73.5 billion. Even though we're seeing discussions of rescheduling on the federal level, safe banking has been in limbo for over a decade now. And banking issues continue, with MasterCard being the most recent entity to say that they are not going to be involved in cannabis trade. We still see a lack of avenues for marketing for cannabis businesses, really shut out of most of the social media opportunities. We have a regulatory patchwork, which makes it very difficult for brands to exist in more than one state because of varied rules. Of course, lack of access to sources of capital like bank loans and small business loans, and the complete prohibition of cannabis still in several states. However, the number of cannabis consumers in the U.S. is growing, and we expect to see 69 million consumers by the year 2030. So it's really important that we develop new markets to meet this demand. At the same time, we expect to see 5.2 million medical cannabis patients in the U.S. by 2030. So even though we talk a lot about bringing adult use online, there are some states out there that are considering medical, and having medical go comprehensively in a state like Texas, for example, really will impact market opportunity, as we'll see in a minute. So if we have a scenario where we could expect 18 new markets to come online by 2030, 9 in adult use and 9 in medical use, we can see what that adds to the consumer population. Of course, Texas and Florida being kind of the jewels of this scenario, each adding 3.5 million consumers to the marketplace. We know that Ohio is likely going to qualify for the ballot. We're still seeing what's going to happen in Florida, and then discussions of whether or not Texas is going to adopt a comprehensive medical cannabis program. On the right, you can see a potential legalization timeline. So you can see that between now and 2030, there is a possibility for all of these states to not only pass legislation or ballot initiatives, but to actually implement programs. And with this, we'll see the number of consumers that live in legal markets skyrocket. So right now, this should say 23 states. We forgot to update it for Minnesota. We see almost half of adults live in a adult use state, population-wise, with an additional 26% living in medical-only states and 27% living in completely illegal states. However, if that scenario that I just presented comes to fruition by 2030, only 3% of the population will live in an illegal state, and a full 66% of the population will live in a state that has both adult and medical use. So this really could turn the tide, not just in legal access for consumers, but the impact that it might have on that gigantic illicit market that I alluded to in the first slide. So let's take a look at what will happen to the illicit market with and without the scenario that I've presented. So if we do see these new state markets come online, we're looking at the legal market eclipsing the unregulated market in 2028. However, if we just have the states that are online now, even by 2030, even though they're getting closer, we're still going to see illicit market sales at a higher rate than total legal market sales. And another reason that the activation of these new states is so important is because over time in mature markets, you start to see revenue decline, as we did between 2021 and 2022 in the states of Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, which are 3 mature markets. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. I think one of the main reasons is what I call shiny ball syndrome. After cannabis is passed, it's very much a novelty. People are buying a whole variety of products. They're buying it for parties. It's really becoming a big deal. And then after a while, that excitement starts to wane. People that are going to become regular consumers kind of settle into those consumption patterns, and it doesn't become as much of a novelty. But there's another reason why we see this sales trend as well, and that is the decline in wholesale pricing. So we do see price compression happen in mature markets. Folks are getting better at growing more efficiently. They're learning what the market does and does not like. They're making fewer mistakes. They're generating large facilities that are able to produce at scale. And this is driving down the price. Now, of course, as you can see, when cannabis is illegal, the price is higher because risk is built into that number. As we see cannabis become more of a consumer packaged good and an agricultural commodity, we can expect to see price compress even further. So what does this all mean as you head into hearing about some of these specific state examples from the rest of these experts? Well, although the market continues to add legal jurisdictions, the industry remains plagued by federal inaction, stigma, and unreasonable restrictions, creating instability. So 1 step forward, 2 steps back is pretty much how we've been experiencing cannabis for the past 2 decades. The number of adult use and medical consumers will continue to rise, but if we don't have the expansion of legal markets, the illicit market will absorb these new consumers. If we're able to add these additional 18 markets by 2030, we will see a scenario where only 6% of the population lives in a state with no cannabis access, and we have the possibility of the regulated market eclipsing the illicit market by 2028, which is not something we're going to see unless we expand market access. These new markets are especially important as sales are declining in mature markets and the product price is also declining. So I hope that wasn't too much of a Debbie Downer scenario of an overview. I've been working in the cannabis space for over 2 decades, and there's a lot of perspective on how far we've come. And as we hear about some of these specific state examples from the rest of the experts, know that this is absolutely a marathon. It is not a sprint. Alcohol prohibition fell 100 years ago, and we're still arguing about how to regulate that. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll hand it off to the rest of my panelists.
Thank you, Amanda. Rachel, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you for that, Amanda. And actually, that sounded a lot more positive than I thought, it was going to be. So thank you so much. I actually feel much happier now. I appreciate it. So I'm Rachel of AB Finwright and 420 CPA. We're in LA, and we've been in the industry since 2009. And thank you so much for the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce for inviting us to speak and to have this informative panel for everyone. We hope it's helpful. So I'm going to talk about challenges and opportunities in the California market. So you can see from this slide here, California kind of prides itself in being agricultural and dairy. So if you look at this, actually the California cannabis retail, well, actually both illicit and legal, actually surpass the dairy market and grapes, of all things. So it kind of gives you an idea of the size of the market. So we're dealing with a huge market here. Just to give you some perspective, so for recreational purposes, we've had California cannabis legal since January 2018. So that's about 5.5 years. So if we look at like kind of normal market cycles and we see where we are, I think we're somewhere kind of in the middle. It's somewhat of a shakeout maturity stage. We're not quite mature yet, but we're in those growing pains right now. And I know it's very painful for a lot of people. We get to see this on the front lines every day. And so I feel people's pain, but I think there's also a lot of reasons to stay hopeful. So just keep in mind, this is normal. So where to begin with some of the challenges we're having in California? It's kind of the same as all the other states. Some of these things are not unique to California. We're just further along than some of the other newer states. So the illicit market is huge. I think at least 65% of the market share. I've heard higher numbers before. Some of the clients that we talk to, some of the cities are actually adding more licenses. So that makes it very, very difficult when certain jurisdictions are already kind of at saturation with the amount of licenses that they should have. Cities think that if they add more, they'll have more revenue. But what happens is they end up kind of putting some of these other folks out of business by adding these new licenses. So that's one of the difficulties. Clearly, regulations are always changing and onerous. Taxes. So in California, we have a very unique tax on tax on tax. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Sometimes there's oversupply, sometimes there's undersupply. So you kind of see what the waves are of what's going on. We deal with fires, we deal with, a lot of issues in outdoor cultivation, indoor cultivation, and the quality of the product. So that's another quality issue. But overall, I think it's just a matter of the fact that we are, 5.5 years in. So distributors, generally distributors don't have a huge profit margin, depending on what kind of distributor that you are. If you're basically bulk flower or bulk distributor, you're kind of a middleman distributor, your takeaway might be very low. It could be, anywhere from 5 to 10% if you're lucky, off of the gross price of the product. And that's essentially what you take out of the pie. And so what we're seeing is some of these larger distributors, wholesalers, who propose to help back this Assembly Bill 766, the Cannabis Credit Protection Act, which would essentially, there's 3 points here. You'd have to report the retailer to the DCC if they were more than 15 days late in payment. The DCC, Department of Cannabis Control, would begin disciplinary proceedings, and they could issue penalties against the retailers if they don't pay the wholesaler. Retailers are prohibited from purchasing on credit if that happens. So kind of the bigger folks are supporting this. With a lot of the people that we work, some of them are smaller stores. And I think that this would be very difficult for them because they rely on credit terms. There are good actors, and we need to allow them to continue to have credit terms. So it would just be very, very difficult for them. So as we could see, challenges with wholesalers such as Herbal. I am not an attorney, I'm an accountant, so I will not speak on this too much, but essentially they went into receivership from what I understand. And they couldn't pay one of their loans for East West Bank. So challenges for California retailers, obviously competition with the illicit market, what I see is race to the bottom on pricing. Some folks are just going so low in pricing that they are trying to kind of squeeze the competition. But what's happening is their competition for the most part is kind of hanging in there. And so it just kind of keeps those prices really, really low. And as I said earlier, the local jurisdictions are issuing more licenses, and then there's tax on tax on tax. So the California retailers, as of January 2023, are now responsible for paying retail excise tax on their product. It used to be the responsibility of the distributors to pay. And it seems like, on its face that would be dollar for dollar. The retailers were paying it to the distributors. Now they're paying it to the CDTFA. What's the big deal? I mean, the big deal is that because of the issues in pricing product, a lot of the retailers are not able to price their product in a way that actually makes up for what they are collecting from the clients or from the customers. So it's just been very difficult to increase their prices to keep up with what they were essentially paying last year in excise tax. One of the big things is the 50% penalty on late excise taxes. If you're 1 day late, it's 50, not 15, 50. So I do want to focus, not also be doom and gloom. There are opportunities in this type of a market, and this is what I'd like to focus on. Licenses are an all low price, a very low rock bottom price in some areas. So this is actually your chance to deploy capital, focus on strategic acquisitions, strategic alliances, also looking at your capital and debt restructuring, clean up your cap tables. This is a good time to get investors, scared shareholders out for pennies on the dollar, also to renegotiate some debt. Another solution is to negotiate with taxing agencies. You have a lot of leverage, especially if your balance sheet is very debt heavy, to go in for offers and compromises and potentially settlements. So you have a lot of negotiations with the taxing agencies, set up payment plans and things like that. All of the agencies listed there are good ones to hit. And then also lastly is just get lean and make sure your operations are really, really good. Thank you very much. And I appreciate everyone for attending.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you, ladies. Okay, moving on, we have Robert Hoban from Clark Hill. Did you get to join with us? Do we have Robert with us?
Yes. Awesome. Good day, everybody. Good to be here. Robert Hoban, the co-chair of the Cannabis Practice Group and at Clark Hill, the member in charge of the Denver office at Clark Hill, also principal at Clark Hill Public Strategies, where we do lobbying and public affairs work around the country, Washington, D.C., and around the world. So happy to be here to talk to you. Interestingly, I sit in Colorado. My practice is 95% outside of Colorado and around the world. I lead a team of about 65 lawyers here at Clark Hill in our industry group. So we're always working outside of Colorado. But I will talk about Colorado today. And if we can, I don't know if I have control of the slides. We'll move to the next slide there. Let's move on from that. A little data snapshot, revenue and licenses. Sales were down 14.3% year over year in 2023 to date as it relates to Q1. Of course, Q2 numbers are not conclusively featured yet, but those numbers are down. They're down substantially, double digits. Total sales since January of 2014, that's a very large number, which also equates to nearly $100 million or $1 billion in tax revenue based on that number on there, 95,333,989. So what Colorado's done quite successfully is leverage those tax revenues into capital improvements in school and education and a number of other enterprises. And that's what's exciting. And that's frankly the promise of a commercial regulated industry. We still have about little over 900 active licenses across the state, although those numbers are going down. Next slide, please. So what are some of the trends and highlights? I've written down some notes. Colorado's a stable, but not excitingly stable marketplace. When you talk about stability in terms of an investment opportunity, Colorado is not always that. Colorado's never been a sexy market for investment or for cannabis commercial businesses because it was one of the first, and frankly, it's just not that large of a state to get excited about, although a lot of innovation and regulatory forward-thinking trends come from the Colorado marketplace. As you look at the bullet points in front of you there, consolidation is definitely on the rise. Smaller licensees continue to aggregate and or sell out to MSOs. We see a trend both in our practice at Clark Hill, but furthermore in the state of Colorado, where there are a number of people with deep pockets, not necessarily funds, but maybe family offices and the like, that are beginning their own MSOs. And they're going out and they're buying assets for pennies on the dollar in the space. And we're seeing smaller shops succumb to that aggregation or consolidation, if you will. With not traditional MSOs, traditional in the cannabis sense, but people attempting to build multi-state operators on their own, and there are dozens of them that we're working with. Recent MasterCard news and the lack of payment processing is a significant setback for the Colorado industry in the marketplace, going back to almost exclusively the ATMs or cashless ATMs, which present their own regulatory challenges and legality concerns, but the MasterCard news was obviously a punch in the gut to the industry in many ways, and it's increased opportunities around armored transport services, and there's a lot more cash flowing into the space. We've seen increased due diligence from the Marijuana Enforcement Division, our state regulatory agency, concerning contaminants, microbials, residual pesticides, residual solvents, and the like. And this led to this continues to lead to a rise in product recalls. We see recalls on a more regular basis than I've ever seen it in any state in Colorado over the last 6+ months. And of course, that also leads to administrative product holds, similarly, or embargoes, another way to put it, in this space. We see different municipalities continuing to buy in. They ease their regulations, and some new markets are opening up. But by and large, Colorado is and has been a saturated marketplace for some time now. And again, stable, but not necessarily exciting. And then that last bullet point, before I go off on just a few items that I think are important to know, that I gathered this morning when I put my thoughts together, is we're really seeing this integration of intoxicating hemp derivatives, or IHDs. You may not think of they're in the same sandbox, but it is absolutely the same sandbox. If you look at what Minnesota did, Minnesota represents a merging of the systems where Delta 8 and those products are part of the regulated marijuana taxation regulated commercial system. And furthermore, it also did something that the marijuana industry has desperately wanted, which is opened up different sales outlets by allowing liquor distributors and liquor stores to get involved in intoxicating hemp-derived and marijuana-derived beverages. So that's an exciting system that's happening in Minnesota, but Colorado continues to maintain this segregation, which also, because it's an interesting point, I've noted that there is a lot of clamor amongst shareholder suits against marijuana operators in states like Colorado that are opposing the sale of IHDs, or they're opposing the sale of these merged systems. They're saying, you're a retail store. I invested in you as a retail store. Stop spending your money lobbying against these things and lobby in favor of regulation, or else we're going to sue you because you're intentionally trying to sell less products. That doesn't make any sense. So those are some of the trends we're seeing in the marketplace. New regulations. As I run on down the line here, you can now actually complete a purchase online in Colorado, clarifying some prior inconsistencies in the law and regulations. You still have to obviously go get that product or have it delivered through a sanctioned delivery system, but you can complete that purchase online, not just reserve it. We see too much supply, obviously not enough demand. The allure of the black market continues to be important here. And what I mean by that is the kind of consumers that you want to walk into a dispensary on a regular basis to buy product. They're not going to dispensaries. They're buying it from caregivers because the lack of quality has diminished as a whole. And that's a concerning topic. And then also the lack of cannabis tourism and the increased competition from surrounding states. That's also concerning in the space. When you look at Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Montana, people are not coming to Colorado like they used to participate in cannabis sales. They're coming for all of the other reasons, but the cannabis sales have declined accordingly. So as the previous speakers, Rachel, et cetera, have mentioned, this is all normal stuff, guys. This is nothing to be alarmed about. Distressed assets are normal at the beginning of an industry. So aggregating these assets as an investor and tracking the trends is very important to do, and to keep your head up, because you never know what opportunities are going to come your way.
Thank you. All right. We have Mike Gorell. Go ahead, take away.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to be talking about Illinois and what's going on over there. Unfortunately, Illinois did not get the memo from California that overtaxing cannabis is not a sure way of making a thriving industry in your state. And unfortunately, if you're a consumer there, you have to pay a 6.25% tax, sales tax. And then on top of that, there's a 10.9% excise tax, which gets you to a 17.15% tax on products sold there. And you have to compare that with the state like Missouri that just came online, and their tax is a flat 4%. And so Missouri was thinking, hey, we would sell, 500 million, in cannabis products this year, and now it's going to be over $1 billion because all these people from Illinois are going to be coming over there because the difference in tax is so significant. And it's just alarming to me that these states, as they come online, that they don't take heed and listen to what has happened in these other states and not tax this industry to the point where it just can't thrive. Continuing this discussion about taxation in Illinois, cultivators there have to pay a 7% tax on gross receipts, and we saw this in California as well. They had a cultivation tax. Finally, they repealed it. But unfortunately, Illinois is keeping this tax, at least for now. Then cannabis retailers have to pay a 20% tax on infused products, cannabis infused products. And then there's non-cannabis infused products that are less than 35% THC. There's a 10% tax, which goes back up to 20% if it's more than 35%. So they just have got a very complex taxing mechanism that really doesn't help the industry. One of the good news that's coming out of Illinois is that they have decoupled from 280E. 280E, of course, is the federal IRS codes statute that says that you can only take cost of goods sold as your only deduction. So at least for Illinois, beginning tax years 1/1 of 23, they will not be following 280E. So that you get a little bit of a break, from that standpoint. And there's about, I want to say, 20 states around the country that have decoupled from 280E. So that's one bright spot from a tax perspective. And then finally, the 2024 budget in Illinois includes a $40 million fund for low interest rate loans to qualified social equity applicants, which they didn't really quite define what is a qualified social equity applicant, but at least there is some funding mechanisms there for social equity applicants to get a license and get some early funding to get their business up and going. And that's all I have, Casey.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I wasn't sure. Thank you for sharing that with us. We have Michael Schramm from Duane Morris LLP up. Let me go ahead and share my screen. We have a presentation from him as well.
All right, the old mute button there. As Casey brings up my slides, Michael Schramm, I'm a part in the New York office of Duane Morris, part of our cannabis team of about 150 lawyers. I head the New York cannabis practice, although much like my fellow panelists, Robert Hoban, the vast majority of my cannabis practice is outside of New York because, as I will explain, there's not much of a cannabis market in New York. And it's been really interesting to hear from Rachel, Mike, Robert, on the sort of states of their markets, which are obviously more mature as we move west to east and particularly into New York. Right, it's a brand new market. Some people would say we don't really have one yet. But we certainly expect what's going to happen in New York to follow what's happened in prior states, both with price compression, tax revenue, illicit sales, et cetera. So, the state of the New York market, currently, we've had a medical market for, quite some number of years, but there've only been 10 vertically integrated operators, are called registered organizations, 100% medical only with fairly restrictive rights. So it wasn't until restrictive ability to get medical cards. So, our market is only about a year or so old. All the licenses were, issued to, very limited groups. In the case of cultivation and processing, it was limited to folks who had previously received, hemp licenses, and that was, hemp licenses for which you were extracting CBD, not, industrial hemp. It was a very lengthy and time-consuming, licensing process. There are now about 300 adult use cannabis cultivators. The vast majority of them didn't get their licenses until, late last summer, early fall. So they're just starting to, plant flowers, plant in the ground, and won't have, flower to sell until, till the October timeframe. For a lot of them, it actually was a good thing because, as I'll mention in a bit, just, we have there's a large glut of flower because of the lack of retail. There are also about 40 adult use processors out there attempting to process some of this, flower there. Then, the next phase of licenses was what was on the retail level. They're called card licenses, conditional adult use retail dispensaries. To get one of those licenses, you had to been, quote, justice involved, meaning you or a member of your immediate family, had a New York-based cannabis conviction, or you're a nonprofit that was serving that industry. Along with that, there were several other requirements that made, the number of applicants, as you funneled down to, a very limited number. To date, they've granted 450 of those licenses, but because of, finding, retail locations and access to capital, we, as of the beginning of this week, we only had 20 stores open. And so the end result of a lot of this was, a fair amount of flower sitting at cultivation facilities, having nowhere to go, and people wondering, do they flash freeze, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully the market begins to open up, a bit more. We've had proposed regulations republished twice, most recently in July. The comment period has expired. So we are hopeful to get final regulations, in the very near term. They'll then be 30 days before they go effective. It creates, the full regime of licenses. It interestingly creates a transition schedule for current license holders, particularly for cultivation, that essentially gives them a fast track to, one of the, various 5 tiers of cultivation, as well as opening it up for, we'll say the general public, anybody who is interested in getting a license. There is a baked into our legislation and regulation, an emphasis on at least half the licenses going to social equity participants. So we'll see how this all shakes out. I think one of the unique things about the New York regulatory scheme is they've created these true party and interest rules that probably most of you have heard of, that really creates a two-tiered market in New York, which mirrors our liquor industry. You cannot have an interest in both the distribution channels, which is anything, above retail, and then you have the retail channels, which are retail, delivery and consumption lounge, and you cannot even have a 0.1% interest in one tier if you have an interest in the other tier, which is actually discouraging a lot of investment because people have yet to figure out, at least in New York, which is going to be the more profitable tier. And if you pick one, you're sort of stuck into that tier unless you divest. The other thing that the proposed regulations have done is accelerate the entrance of the registered organization, those vertically integrated medical operators, into the market. Upon payment of a fee, they will be entitled to enter the market right away, and, for lack of a better word, co-brand 3 of their 6 medical dispensaries to sell adult use. And since they are up and running in desirable locations, it may in fact give them a leg up in this market, and to some extent eliminate the head start that we thought these initial license holders were going to receive in this market by having some period of time to get started. And so we sort of roll forward until where do we think this is all going to go? Casey, you can go to the next slide. I think the one before that. I'm looking at mine. Sorry. Where we are in the New York market. I think more so than maybe even every other state. We've had a significant amount of legal challenges. The first one that came out that has sort of gone away is because of this requirement for the card licenses to have a New York conviction. There was a interstate commerce clause challenge to say you're effectively imposing a residency requirement for retail. And based upon where the lawsuit was brought, there were a couple of counties upstate that were enjoined from issuing new licenses. That has, fortunately been somewhat resolved. Licenses have been granted, and as I said, we have 400. The next one that just dropped was there was a group of disabled veterans who have, filed and have actually gotten an injunction from New York issuing any more retail licenses, or even allowing any stores that were licensed but have not yet opened to open, on the grounds that our Cannabis Commission, the Office of Cannabis Management, issued regulations defining social equity in a way that they believe the regulators were not given the authority to narrow it down to just one group within the whole social equity. There is a hearing tomorrow, and it'll be interesting to see what happens if that injunction stays in place. It's going to severely delay the launch of the real New York market. And then also recently, as part of the July release of proposed regulations, there were some emergency regulations in place, attempting to limit the beverage business in New York, hemp-based beverages. There's been a lawsuit to challenge that. The other big issue in New York that I think most other states have seen as well, but it's particularly acute in New York, is the impact on the unlicensed or illicit businesses in New York. For any of those folks of you who have been in New York City in the past couple of years, you would have sworn that there were 1,000 legal dispensaries in New York. Stores with big plate glass windows, fully advertising that they are selling cannabis. But other than the 20 fully licensed one, they're all unlicensed. it, has created a very unequal playing field, but they are not paying taxes. They don't have the high compliance costs. It is having the impact of discouraging, well-funded applicants who could actually open stores pretty quickly, because they don't think in this current environment they really have the ability to compete, on a equal playing field. Obviously, the whole issue of how you convert gray market participants to the legal market is a challenging one that's way beyond the scope of my 7 minutes or so. It is something New York is trying to address in one form or another. They have a fairly active, enforcement regime that was finally authorized. They are, they have the ability to close down stores. They have the ability to go directly against landlords. We have not seen a ton of that in effect yet, given, as a percentage of the total. But, they're sending the message that, if you're a legacy operator, play by the rules, apply for a license, and compete in the legal market. And so I know we have a limited time, so I will cede whatever time I have left, or if I went over, I apologize to my next panelist.
Perfectly fine. Thank you for sharing all of that. And again, we will recap all of this on our website and on YouTube and other socials. So we'll make sure we capture anything we left off there. Lawrence, go ahead. This one's for you, I believe, and you're covering Mississippi and Oklahoma.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael and Casey. My name is Lawrence Cadgigal. I represent the Cadgigal Group, and it's a kind of a unique 280E financial services practice. Previously, I only represented one great 280E firm, and now I represent a handful of some of those wonderful alumni, in addition to some other traditional large 280E practices. This allows our clients to have, sometimes they get to keep the same sales and customer service, and depending on the project, accessing different CPAs. What I thought was going to be our biggest challenge has been our biggest help is other CPAs aligning us with other CPAs. The feedback is, I'm worried about marketing, I'm worried about sales, I'm worried about customer service, sign me up. And they like that they can just focus on being CPAs and delivering the good news when they talk with clients, and I handle the sales and the customer service for the other ones. The great thing about that is it allows us to access, I call it playing offense instead of just playing defense. You need the risk management. You have to have the proper 280 strategy. I'm not the CPA. I have the relationships. I'm very good at helping them get wins on the other side of the ledger, meaning let's get you money in the door. Let me open up relationships. Let me kick down doors for you. Let me work on your behalf in another way. And so I don't know if it's necessarily a disruptor nationally yet, but in my little neck of the woods, this concept has gone over very well. But enough about me and our firm. I'd like to chat about Oklahoma and Mississippi. Both are similar in population. Both are southern red states, and both have taken different strategies to get to the same place, which is oversupply. Oklahoma has eclipsed Oregon in quantifiable numbers as the worst oversupply situation. The Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority has published a study that has shown that there's 32 times more produced than is needed. So what that equates to is for every 1 gram that's needed and bought, 64 grams are produced. That's not sustainable. As you can see on the chart, there's only 3.9 million in the state of Oklahoma. There's almost 6,500 cultivators. Colorado has more population, rec market, and they have less than 1,000 operators total. That's not sustainable. So we are now being called from the DEA, has told the state of Oklahoma that we are now the worst exporter of illegal cannabis in the country due to that situation. And I'll kind of take a step back. How do we get there? The pendulum has swung kind of the other direction it was. Low barriers to entry, $2,500, and you can fog a mirror and you get a license. There's no canopy requirements. So unlimited licensing with monster grows. And then we didn't implement metric until 22. So 4 years without metric, they wondered what was happening. So now again, that was the Wild West. It was very loose laws. The only silver lining to that is the low barrier to entry had people of minority or generally underrepresented were able to get access to the market just like everyone else. And then we always grew up in the 70s and 80s. If you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. Well, if you can make it in Oklahoma, you can make it anywhere, baby. It is the most brutal market. And I'll echo what we've heard in Colorado, in California. It's the same way. So now the pendulum has swung the other direction. We don't have it in writing, but we can see it from the reading the tea leaves. The State Fire Marshal, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics, the Oklahoma Marijuana Authority, if they're all starting to take action immediately, they're being told to decrease the number. So from an investment standpoint, no one touches Oklahoma. What we've always been taught by the VC people is we'll see who shakes out, who makes it at the end. That's who we'll kind of run in and support. So we're to that level now where these numbers are coming down. At the height, we had over 10,000 cultivators. That's coming down. The rumor is that the next reports are coming out. It's going to show it closer to 5,000 or less. I still don't understand why dispensaries are opening, and the processing has gone down as well. So the silver lining is people that were generally shut out. It's not just the monochromatic Richie Richardsons that are getting licensed. It is everyone is being able to get a license, good or bad. Mississippi has followed Oklahoma, and they purposely wrote rules to not get to this situation, which is wonderful. The only caveat to that is, as you can see, they don't have a ton of cultivators, not a ton of processing or dispensaries, but the patient count is at 21,000 versus Oklahoma, which has 353,000. We got to get those numbers up, and I'll kind of transition into Mississippi. The Cannabis Chamber of Commerce Executive Director Chris and I, and Matthew, have been working with the Mississippi Cannabis Trade Organization to hopefully work with them to help. We've all seen this movie before. You want to have someone that's helping you holistically as a state and the individual level to, you don't want to pay someone to watch this movie with. You want to pay someone that has been through this, that'll help guide you through this. The excise tax that was set for Mississippi, they were assuming $3,000 pounds for a certain amount of time frame. That's generally how it goes. How we were taught, we were teaching our groups, stay in the black at 600. So when the prices even out at 1,000, you're still having a good margin. When you first entrance to market, build up your war chest when you're having the $2,000, $3,000, $3,500 pounds. Mississippi's not getting to enjoy that strategy quite yet, which is making it even harder for them coming out the gate to immediately have prices. Right now, they're looking at $1,400 pounds. That's for this new of an industry. That's generally you get to experience a higher amount. So some of the things that are contributing to the patient count, they had issues with the actual issuing of the patient licenses at a certain point. That's been fixed. Now the bottleneck is, and it also at the beginning, the bottleneck was the patient licenses were only good for 6 months. So it was this horrible catch-22 where patients weren't getting their license right away. So they're waiting for a dispensary to open. Well, the people that were awarded dispensaries, why am I going to open up a store if I have literally 7 patients in my county? I'm going to wait for a little bit to the dispensary. So that's kind of going. Now they're allowing, they've expanded who can who can write the prescriptions for the patients. And the bottleneck now is that they're booked up 3 weeks in a row, and it's increasing about 1,000 a week that we're looking at. So it's not necessarily doom and gloom for each state. For Oklahoma, we tell people as soon as the walls collapse and we can export, Oklahoma will walk all over a lot of other states. We've had to have the pure capitalism. One of the good parts about that is you're leaner, you're stronger, you're better, you're faster to market. You've had to adapt. It's adapt or die. Another states next to us, Missouri has less than 400 licenses. Arkansas has less than 50. Cultivators that have withstand the 5 years, the product is getting much better now. They're learning to operate at the most lean levels that's available. So that's a positive for the state of Oklahoma. Mississippi, you can look forward to that as well. To help get you to that point, selfish plug, you might not want to vet your CPAs by zip code. Reach out to Mike, reach out to Rachel. Rachel's got a wonderful CPA with Simon. Not everyone has that. We're not everything to everyone. explore your options. You're going to need every chance you can get to survive this with only 21,000 patients right now. So I want to say thank you to the Chamber for helping us get them going. And then thank you for the panelists that had us.
Thanks, Lawrence. All right, Tom, Raza, you guys want to go ahead and take it away?
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Zuber. I'm the managing partner of Zuber Lawler. It's great to see quite a number of friends here on this panel. And briefly about Zuber Lawler, we have offices. I'm based in Los Angeles with my colleague, Raza Lawrence, who's also here. And we have offices across the country and do work around the world. And I will point out that we're going to be talking about the state of Texas, but neither Raza and I are barred there. Raza, my colleague, has been in cannabis since 2009, doing deals and litigation. And we're excited to be here. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Raza. I know we don't have much time.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm excited to see another southern red state expanding its cannabis market. We're going to be talking about Texas here. And I think the increasing popularity of cannabis in Texas, it really shows the universal appeal of cannabis and the opportunities that are opening up around the country as the stigma is going away and more people are getting interested in using cannabis for both medical and recreational purposes. Just in terms of my background, I've been working in California cannabis industry since 2009. California was the first state to legalize medical marijuana all the way back in '96. And the industry has obviously evolved a lot over the years. Like Texas, California initially was medical only. Originally, I was mostly representing people in nonprofit medical marijuana collectives. It was the only way the industry could operate in California. A lot of people are still being prosecuted for felonies back then. Since 2016, California has opened up its licensing. Its regulations have increased, and California reduced a lot of felonies to misdemeanors. So it's a really different environment. It's interesting to see how it changed. And hoping that emerging markets like Texas can learn from some of California's mistakes. California still has a huge illicit market. Licenses have been really slow to be issued. Licensing is too complicated, separate local and state processes, and there's a perception of widespread corruption. Texas, in a lot of ways, is a little simpler than California, but it's also more limited, which we'll get into. But Texas also, it's facing the same issues as everyone else. California and the other cannabis states in terms of federal illegality and the conflicts of laws. There's the punitive 280E tax rules and methods to get around that, the lack of access to banking, the threats of federal criminal prosecution and asset forfeiture, and the trademark and other IP protection for federally illegal products. It's great to have a community here like this where people can share experiences and collaborate. The cannabis industry, as everyone knows, it's experiencing a lot of challenges now, but also there's new opportunities with these new markets opening up, millions of new potential customers. Public opinion is shifting quickly, increasing bipartisan support, and the federal law is likely changing soon. Now, in terms of the specifics of Texas, Texas is doing things a little bit differently than most states with cannabis licensing. Texas is more conservative politically than a lot of places, and it started out as a very limited medical program, but it's slowly liberalizing and expanding. To start out, Texas was limited only to intractable epilepsy. That was the only patients who could get access to medical cannabis. It was all the way back in 2015. 2019, Texas extended the access to patients with a list of other conditions, but they tended to be, very serious conditions: terminal cancer, autism, multiple sclerosis, seizure disorders, and incurable neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington's disease. 2021, Texas added non-terminal cancer and PTSD to the list of approved conditions. So you see it expanding to more people, more conditions, but it still is limited to specified conditions. California law had a sort of catch-all phrase after its list of conditions saying, or any other condition for which cannabis can provide relief. So in California, a lot of people were getting medical recs initially for things like anxiety, insomnia, depression. Texas doesn't allow those conditions. It's still limited, but it seems to be trending in the direction of allowing more patients to participate. Also, Texas is unique in it doesn't allow any sales of vaping or smokable flowers. I think it's because of it's medical only. And there's this perception that smoking and vaping, to some people, it just doesn't seem like medicine. It's maybe a little more difficult to dose the products. But Texas does allow edible products, beverages, tinctures, and topicals. And the other unique aspect of Texas is only low THC medical cannabis products are allowed. Started out as 0.5% THC by weight. It's gone up to 1% Delta 9 THC by weight. And the federal standard is 0.3% Delta 9 THC. If it's below that, it's considered hemp and thus not a federally controlled substance. Above that, it's considered cannabis and it's Schedule 1. But the low THC limitation, in reality, it doesn't really make a huge difference because there's no limit to the weight of the product you can sell. So if you have 1% by weight, if you have a 1/4 pound edible or tincture product, that 1% of THC still equals over 1,000 milligrams of THC. So there's people can still get products with similar amounts of THC, but it's just it has to be within this low THC framework. The other unique aspect about Texas, it's all vertically integrated. There's only 3 licenses currently in the state, but each of them can do all the cannabis activities: cultivation, manufacturing, distribution to other license holders, storefront retail, delivery, and they can even test their own products, or they're required to test their own products. In California, you're not allowed to test by the same company that makes a product because it's considered a conflict of interest. But Texas, it's all done under the umbrella of these 3 license holders currently. But there's a lot of room, I think, for outside operators to come in and potentially take over management of different aspects of these businesses that are under the umbrellas of these 3 licenses. Texas is also expanding its number of licenses. It just recently had another round of applications. That application window is closed and the state's evaluating the licenses, but everyone's expecting it's going to issue a number of other licenses going forward. Also, in terms of these, there are only 3 licensed businesses currently, but they're allowed to open satellite pickup centers all across the state and also deliver statewide. So it's really a huge potential market, but all under the umbrella of these small number of licenses. In terms of the future of cannabis in Texas, traditionally Texas has some of the harshest laws for cannabis in the country. Non-medical cannabis is still illegal in Texas, and possession of up to 2 ounces is a misdemeanor. But any commercial activity outside the licensing system is still a serious crime in Texas. If you get caught selling over 5 pounds of cannabis, that can get you up to 20 years in prison in Texas. Selling up over 50 pounds can get you up to life in prison. So there still are some harsh laws, but they're trending in the direction of getting more liberal. In terms of how to get involved in the Texas industry, there are opportunities for people in other states to come in. Everyone's waiting for the federal law to change to open up the national market. Biden has ordered a federal review of the Schedule 1 status of cannabis, and there's different ways that could go at the federal level. If it moves to Schedule 2 or 3, it's only legal as an FDA-approved drug. If it's descheduled federally, then it would allow non-medical recreational cannabis. If at the federal level it does go medical only, Texas seems to be well positioned, given its medical focus, to jump into that market. There's a lot of opportunities for brands to get into the Texas market through white labeling, to bring in the name recognition, the goodwill, the quality control aspects. And there's especially big opportunity for medical focused brands to get involved in Texas, just because of the really huge size of the potential market. There's also an opportunity for people, for Texas businesses to bring in management and others with experience in licensed cannabis, whether those are attorneys, security consultants, skilled cultivators and manufacturers, marketing professionals. A lot of people in these new markets like Texas, they don't have a lot of knowledge and experience. They haven't dealt with a lot of these unique issues regarding federal illegality, because cannabis is totally illegal under their state laws until just recently. And it tends to help in dealing with government officials and licensed operators if you can show that you have experience in other licensed markets. And just in terms of other outside operators coming in due to federal law, commercial cannabis activity cannot cross state lines, but a lot of cannabis businesses and brands have set up basically independent operations in each specific state. And operators and brands can work in multiple states in this environment as long as there's no cross-border transactions. But Texas has a lot of potential, obviously a lot of people there. And I think it makes sense for cannabis businesses to try to get a toehold in the state right now. And as the market expands, then they could ramp up their Texas activity. But that sums up Texas. Nice to be here. And thanks for coming.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing all that information and providing such insight to everybody. We have a question that came in from one of our attendees, and I believe this was up when Michael from Dwayne Morris was speaking, but anybody can answer to this. Are you guys able to see the question in the chat?
Yeah, I can see it. So, the question was, at least one of the dispensaries in New York, out in Long Island, is doing $100,000 a week in sales. What do we think is, what opportunities does it create in the space? I think, I have to give 2 minutes on sort of the New York regulatory scheme for New York, county by county, town by town. You could opt in or opt out. If you're opted in theory, there is no, the municipalities can't regulate the numbers directly, but you can't be within 1,000 feet of another dispensary in densely populated areas, and then you can't be within 500 feet of a school. I think 250 within place of worship, or maybe the other way around. But and so there may or may not be limited real estate, and so if you're in a location where you are fairly distant from another dispensary, I think you will continue to do well. Obviously, as Rachel had mentioned, when California opened, or maybe one of the other palaces, it is a new shiny object. So, it'll be interesting to see as months play out what happens to those sales. But also once we have more than 20 dispensaries in the state, one will assume that their weekly sales numbers are going to drop precipitously, if there are if within surrounding communities they get their own dispensaries. That being said, dispensaries are a lucrative business. If you have, if you can find a location that you can go into, and remember, you can't, because it is federally illegal. It's unlikely you can be in a building that has a mortgage on it, because most banks will not, view that as an impermissible use. But if you can find that and you have capital and can wait out the year or two, till you get to profitability, I think everybody views these as highly profitable businesses. But there are a lot of ifs and whens that you have to factor into that.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right. I think that's the only questions we have. Again, we're going to put this up on our socials, YouTube, and our website. Thank you guys for joining us today. Thank you, panelists, for sharing that information and insight. If you guys have any information, you can find information on our website. We also encourage you to check out the details regarding our membership. And we also have the details on our upcoming events. We do the virtual events on a monthly basis, and we do our in-person events quarterly. And I believe our next one is coming up in September in Irvine, California at Cannabis Talk 101. Thank you guys all for joining us today. You guys all have a great afternoon.